everybody. So today we're going to talk about the elements of art and principles of design. So make sure you're taking notes in your sketchbook as we go along. So there are 7 different elements of art: line, shape, form, color, value, texture, and space. So a line is just a mark that is made by a tool. It could be a brush, it could be a pencil, a stick, and this line is created by the movement of a tool. So there are different types of lines, and you don't need to necessarily write these down, but they're good to know. So a contour line is just that outer edge of the form. You use this all the time when you are drawing. It's indicating that edge to the viewer. Gestural lines are really quick, kind of scratchy lines that are used to indicate movement, especially in the human figure. So often when an artist is trying to capture someone in movement, but they don't have a camera or something to snap it with, they're going to make these quick scratchy lines to kind of just jot down that form and add in the details later. An implied line are lines that are not necessarily connected, but our eyes and our brains will take that information and we'll start to see it as a line. So a perfect example of this is the cat here. So those lines are not necessarily connected, but our brain is, kind of having them flow together, and we start to see that outline of the cat. Shape. Okay, so shape is an area that is created by connecting a solid line, or it's contained within an implied line, what we just talked about with that cat there. So there's 2 different types of shapes. You can have geometric shapes, so those are the ones with the names that you recognize: circle, square, rhombus, triangle, etc. But organic shapes are kind of the blobby shapes, or the ones that don't necessarily have a name. They're still a shape because it's an area connected by a line, but they just don't have those fancy schmancy names. So here are just some different types of shapes. So you could have organic, positive, and negative. So positive is like the part of the design that's in the foreground, and the negative space is in the background. It's still shape. You could have dynamic and static shape as well. Form. Okay, so form describes volume and mass, or the 3-dimensional aspects of an object that takes up space. So sometimes people get these a little confused with shape. So for example, we have this circle here. A circle is a shape. It's 2-dimensional. It's flat. You can't hold a circle. However, its little friend next to it, the sphere, that is a form. It has volume. You could hold a ball in your hand. So like I said, it has height, width, and depth. Same thing with this apple over here to the left. The apple is flat with the outer shape of it, but when you have those lines, those are called cross contour lines, and those lines help indicate the idea of form and 3-dimensionality. You can see where the lines dip into the core of the apple. Color. So color is the element of art that is produced when light striking an object is reflected back into the eye. So we have a picture of Klimt down here, one of his very famous paintings, and color, when we see it, it's bouncing off of the object or the image, and it is reflected back into our eyes. We're getting a little scientific here. So there are complementary colors. So complementary colors are colors that are just across from one another on the color wheel. They help one another stand out, and they make each other kind of pop. Red and green, like Christmas colors, purple and yellow, orange and blue. Often a lot of times logos will use them. So if you think of like the Syracuse basketball colors, that's orange and blue, or the Minnesota Vikings colors, yellow and purple. They really make each other pop and stand out. Okay, value. So value is the use of lightness and darkness. You can do value drawings where you're having different shades of pencil drawings, which we're going to be doing a little bit later. You can also have different shades and values of color, really light blues, really dark blues, and you can get those with any kind of art material, but you often use them a lot with paint. Monochromatic. So monochromatic is just when a piece of artwork is using only one color, but it's using all different tints and shades of that color. So here are some examples of some portraits here of some famous celebrities where they're only using one color, but they're using different tints and shades of that color, of the purple, of the pinks, to indicate those different changes in the form of the face. Texture. So there's two types of texture. You have actual texture, and this describes the surface quality we can feel with our fingers. So if you were to like touch a cactus, it's going to be prickly, or if you run your hand against some bark, you know, it's kind of rough. So it's something you can actually feel with your fingers. And I use that picture, the picture of this sculpture up here with the two little people. This is from the Memorial Art Gallery, which is in downtown Rochester. And the kind of cool thing about the sculpture is it's outside, and you know, they allow you to kind of sit and touch it, when usually, you know, it's kind of frowned upon to touch artwork, but this one is a little bit more of an interactive piece, so it's okay. Down here we have this beautiful painting down here of this still life, and I'm just noticing now that I messed up. This is not by Van Gogh, so I must have used the same template from another slideshow. So this is not done by Van Gogh. This is done by a more contemporary painter, where these balloons are using that idea of simulated texture, so you can kind of tell what it would feel like if you were to touch it. Okay, let's go on to space. So actual space is a three-dimensional volume that can be emptied or filled with objects. It has height, width, and depth. So this beautiful sculpture up here, this copper sculpture, takes up actual space, you know, outside, and there's space around the figure. The illusion of space is an image that appears in a painting or drawing, and it creates the feeling of depth using different techniques. So some ways to do this is through atmospheric perspective. So having things closer to you, somewhat in the back, or the foreground, the middle ground, and then the background. Having things overlap creates the illusion of space. Perspective, things going back and coming towards one another to that vanishing point to create that illusion that this hallway is going back into space. Oops. Which one is symmetrical and which one is asymmetrical? I'll give you a moment to think. So the one that is symmetrical is the one down here to the right. So we got this biblical painting going on down here, and it's, you know, pretty well balanced. You know, it's not like perfectly symmetrical on either side like a butterfly would be, but the amount of visual weight on either side is pretty even. This painting over here to the left, this is asymmetrical. It's still balanced. You have this kind of thick, chunky, heavy visual weight of the cliffs over to the left, but then it is balanced out because the painter put in these sailboats over to the right here, and it's kind of with that bright orange, and that's kind of capturing our eye and drawing our eye over to the side of the painting, so it kind of balances out the visual weight, so your eye just doesn't get stuck over on the left side of the painting. Movement. So visual movement is used to kind of bounce the viewer's eye around a work of art. Movement can be directed along lines, edges, shapes, and colors within a work of art. So we have this really famous painting where it's a shipwreck, and you know, they're trying to flag down a ship in the distance. So all these different bodies are kind of laying all over the place, and our eye is just kind of bouncing all along, you know, these different bodies to kind of direct the viewer's eye to the man up here trying to flag down that painting. Rhythm. Rhythm is the repetition of visual movements. So that could be colors, it could be shapes or lines, and the variety helps keep the artwork exciting and active. So repetition, so I love this little diagram down here because rhythm can get really confusing. So repetition is not the same thing as rhythm. Repetition is the same thing over and over again. So green rectangle, green rectangle, green rectangle. Pattern is when you have different elements, but they go in a certain order, they stop, and then that order repeats again. So red, blue, red, blue, red, blue. Rhythm, however, is when you have different elements, they go in a random order, so you never know when they're going to repeat. So red, blue, green, red, 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 green, blue, red, green, red, red, red. Okay, so contrast. Contrast refers to the differences in value, or it could be value, colors, textures, shapes, or other elements. It doesn't necessarily have to be just value or colors. It could be, different elements. So it helps things pop out. So you could have a high value drawing, so that black and white drawing of Captain America up there. Having, bright colors side by side. So Andy Warhol was known for these kind of very colorful pictures of things that you see in pop culture. So things that are instantly recognizable. So this is Jake the dog from a cartoon show. So he would always have these very bold, very bright colors next to one another, and this is the style of Andy Warhol. You can also have texture contrast, so having that soft, smooth leaf versus up against that kind of crunchy frost along the leaf's edge next to that really rough looking wood or the bark in the background. You can have temperature contrast, warm versus cool colors. So there's many, many different ways to have contrast. Emphasis. So emphasis is when you have an area or an object within the artwork that draws attention and becomes a focal point. The artist makes it stand out. So I want you to take a look at these 3 different paintings before we talk about them. And I just want you to think about, how does the artist create emphasis in each of them? So start with the top one with the lady in red. How does the artist create or create a focal point or draw attention to that? So hopefully you're saying in your head that it's the artist used that bright red color amongst the all black and white cityscape around her. Now let's go down to the still life with the apples. How does the artist create emphasis using these fruit? Well, first of all, he has it, the color contrast, so the red versus the yellow. He or she also makes sure to not only have a different color, but also a different type of fruit. They could have very easily chose like a green apple, but instead they chose that yellow-green pear. All right, last but not least, let's talk about Andrew Wyeth's painting. How does he create emphasis with that painting? Hopefully you're saying, well, she's in the center, she's in the foreground, there's not a whole lot going on around her. The colors are also actually pretty dull, and then that thick kind of dark hair, that dark contrast in her hair also makes her pop out and stand out amongst, the very pastel kind of dress she's wearing and the yellow, green kind of colored background. Great. All right, next let's talk about pattern. So pattern is the combination of elements or shapes repeated in a reoccurring and regular arrangement. All right, so we have some tessellations by M.C. Escher. He is a genius. I always love his artwork, and he does these patterns where you will see, one image first. So like maybe for this one to the right here, you see the white birds first, and then, when you take a closer look, you see, oh my gosh, in the background, and intertwining are these bluebirds. And same thing with, I believe this looks like a little dog to me. I'm going to say it's like a little French bulldog or some kind of gargoyle or something. You might see the white dogs first, and then in the background you start to see those black little dogs, or maybe you see the black dogs first, and then you notice over time, like, oh, there's also white dogs in the background. So yes, he is the master of pattern. All right, we are almost done. Unity. So unity in a artwork creates a sense of wholeness by using similar elements within the composition and placing them in a way that brings them all together, giving the artwork a sense of completion. So it feels like it all goes together. So I want you to take a look at these two works of art, and I want you to think in your head, how do these works of art kind of feel like they go together? Or how does everything in the one work of art feel like it goes together? So let's take a look at Kandinsky's one with all of these different circles. How does he create the sense of unity, like everything in this picture goes together? Hopefully you're saying, well, that he's using, the different circles, the different sizes of circles, and in different ways. There's some big ones, there's some small ones. He also is kind of using I guess you can't really say he was using warm versus cool colors. He has a little bit of both, but he's got that repetition of lots of pinks and reds and yellows and a little bit of cool colors in there as well. So that's how he creates that sense of unity. How do you think Van Gogh at the bottom here, with his most famous work of art, Starry Night, probably one of the most famous works of art in the world, how did he create that sense of unity in Starry Night? What did he do? So hopefully you're saying to yourself, he created that sense of unity with the brush strokes, or with kind of that texture. So he's kind of got this like stippled texture that he does, this kind of technique that he uses. So that's one way he creates unity. He's also using these very cool colors, these rich blues and greens, and kind of like even though yellow is technically a warm color, he's using like a yellow-green throughout the painting. All right, so hopefully you guys have all jotted these down in your notes. Make sure to take a snapshot of your notes and upload it to Google Classroom. Thanks for stopping by.